$100 million!
Money, money.
How much is a great game worth to you? Right now, microtransactions are the main battleground in gaming. Gamers protest all the time about being nickel and dime, while at the same time the amount of money generated by those same microtransactions is greatly exceeding the amount of money generated by just paying for games the traditional way. It's a very complex issue to unpack. We can all agree that games cost a lot of money to make, right? Companies are investing hundreds of millions of dollars to make the best games they can, but they also need to make a lot of money or the risk just isn't worth it. So they look at what has worked in gaming before and what is working in other industries now, and they come up with new ways to charge players for the games they play. As consumers, we don't get to see the hard numbers in the gaming industry. We really only sneak a peek at the few solid facts whenever a leak goes public or companies want to celebrate a milestone. Because of that, when beloved studios are being shut down or tens of thousands of developers are being laid off, we can only speculate as to why. Monetization is a free-for-all right now, and today we're going to take a look at how we got here and if there's anything we can do about it.
Let's take it back to the beginning. A time before most of you can remember and before some of you were even born. Some of the earliest home video games you could buy came on the Atari 2600. They looked like this. In this ad from Atari Age magazine, you can bear witness to the new hotness known as Earthworld, and you could own it for the low price of $37.95. Adjusted for inflation in 2024, that game would cost $123.51. This game. We're talking here about games sometimes being developed by just one person in a very short period of time, selling for today's equivalent of $100. Investing the money needed to develop, publish, advertise, manufacture, and ship a game is serious business. And while a hit game is a bet that can win a publisher millions of dollars in profit if successful, let's not forget that so many other games are not hits, and publishers lose money on games that don't sell all the time. It's the nature of the business. But that's ancient history, right? Surely that isn't anything like the crazy monetization that goes on today. Let's fast forward a decade to the height of the console wars, Sega versus Nintendo in 1993. Sega wanted to make the biggest RPG out at the time. Phantasy Star 4 was an expensive project to make, so they put the game on store shelves at a base price of $99. You heard it right, $99 in 1993. Imagine if you want to pick up Tears of the Kingdom in 2024 and the price was $215.18. That actually happened. A lot of people think monetization is out of control today, but we've never seen anything on this level, right?
And let's not forget that throughout the 80s and 90s, arcades were the place where the biggest and best games came out first. Sure, it's exciting to hang out at the mall and experience all the newest games, but you are really gonna pay for that. The cost of entry to playing a new game could be very low, like just $0.25, or for some very popular games, $1. Every few minutes, the game would demand more money from you if you wanted to keep playing. And that's if you're good enough to survive the onslaught that the developers would hit you with in order to make sure you don't live that long. If you're not good at the game, you might only get a few seconds with it. Then it's too bad, sucks to be you, go ask your mom for more money. Concepts such as score and lives that gamers would be annoyed at today started here in the arcades as a way to get more people to spend more money. Imagine if a tough game like Elden Ring cost $1 to start playing, and every time you died, it cost another $1 to try again. Even for a good player, the amount of money you would have to hand over in order to be able to finish that game would be astronomical. All of those flashing lights and beautiful graphics are intentionally created to entice you to come check the game out, and the game is tuned in a way that encourages you to play for a bit, but not too long because we need you to keep paying. Sound familiar? Arcades were microtransaction havens, and a lot of gamers' first exposure to video games was there. Does luring kids into asking their parents for more and more money for just a few seconds with a new game sound like predatory monetization? Not all that different from the cash shop in a free-to-play game, is it? Some people think in-game monetization started down the wrong path in 2006 with Bethesda's Horse Armor, the first in-game monetized DLC, but no.
When the in-person arcade business started to disappear in the late 90s, it didn't really go away. The concept of luring people in with bright lights and the promise of a few seconds of fun was too much of a moneymaker for it to completely fade out. Instead, it went online, waiting for the perfect time and place to re-emerge. And re-emerge it did in a form no one would have expected. An innocent-looking Facebook game called Farmville. Everybody and their mom, literally, was playing Farmville when it first came out in 2009. This included me and my own mom. This is where the modern free-to-play microtransaction machine really kicked into high gear. Players of this game were lured in by the constant barrage of advertising, most of it coming from your own friends and family who played the game, and your time in the game was spent managing a variety of different systems and currencies. The casual player saw this as a fun distraction. How could something that looks cutesy be made to steal my money? They want to keep playing, but the in-game systems have timers that slow you down after a while. Maybe it only costs $1 to buy more time with the game. Reminds you of the kids in the arcade, doesn't it? This is also the point where there began to be a divide among the players into two main groups. There are those who want to pay money for a game one time only, upfront, and never have to worry about something being available for that game that they cannot have. And then there's the other group who absolutely do not want to pay anything for a game, but oh, look at that beautiful skin, I have to have it. Oh, and that one too. Ooh, there's this new one that's even better. Oh my god, look at this, I have to have it.
Core gamers who want to pay one price for everything in a game are really trying to hold on to the idea of a standard price that is acceptable for gamers and game publishers. But the big games most core gamers get excited about are not made by one person over a weekend anymore. They take teams of thousands of expert developers years to make, and all that work doesn't come cheap. The budgets for these games can reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. In the case of the biggest games, such as Grand Theft Auto's next entry, likely into the billions. It's a tremendous financial risk, and it makes sense to want to make as much money as possible in order to offset that risk. Yes, a new game could make billions of dollars if it is successful, but if it's not, that could mean disaster for everyone involved. And a lot of games are not successful. At the same time, the free-to-play microtransaction-fueled market really took off on mobile. From those gamers' point of view, there's a lot less risk involved when you don't have to pay any money up front to try a game out. And if you do wind up liking that game, what's the harm in spending a few dollars to support? I mean, if you never look at your overall spending, you could wind up spending far more on that game in the long run than you would have if you had just paid for it up front. But if you're not looking at your overall spending, how would you ever know? From the publisher's point of view, the situation is the same. These games cost a lot of money to create and could possibly earn an unfathomable amount of money back, but they are still a huge risk. Big expensive games fail all the time, and those failures cost companies money and developers jobs.
So, if you were a game publisher, what would you do? The gold rush of mobile gaming and the constant microtransactions and monetization that come along with it have become the biggest part of the gaming business. The safest bet. In 2022, we're talking about 51% of the total gaming market, worth $140 billion. At the same time, that growth the mobile market is enjoying is coming at the cost of the slow decline of the core gaming market, where your traditional console and PC games live. So understand, you may not like the fact that monetization strategies that bring core gaming closer to mobile gaming exist. But the companies still making these games are taking riskier and riskier bets in order to keep doing so. This is why a new game like First Descendant comes out armed with all the mobile monetization strategies. The amount of money companies lose on big games that don't do well will put some of these companies out of business eventually. If gamers think something like Elden Ring is the greatest game ever and it should be selling more than Call of Duty, here's a reality check. Elden Ring has sold around 25 million copies in the 2 years it's been out, a real triumph, and it's by far FromSoft's best-selling game ever. But Call of Duty sells that amount every year without fail. If gamers are voting with their wallets, the message we are sending is that we want more games like Call of Duty. And because it sells so much, so regularly, it's a safer bet than something like Elden Ring. So again we ask, how much is that beautiful new game worth to you? Should the costs of these big core games go up in order to offset the bigger risk companies take making them? Should the cost increase be for everyone or just the people who want to pay to play the game first, such as the common pay extra to play 3 days early access that you see with most big games now?
The fact is, there will always be marketing. You're hit with marketing every single day, everywhere you look, with anything you do. If you're a gamer, you know that there are teams of very educated marketing experts paid very well to develop new ways to get you excited to spend more of your money on games. But just because these marketing schemes exist doesn't mean that we have to fall victim to them. At the end of the day, we find that it's always best to recognize when you're being sold to and decide for yourself if that thing is worth your hard-earned money. In other words, we choose to take personal responsibility for what we spend money on rather than being angry that things exist for sale that we don't want to buy. When we were kids at the arcade, we learned that as exciting as playing a few minutes of that cool new game would be, we could instead save that money and buy the home version, and then we could play it as much as we want. The new arcade game is there, enticing you, but you have the freedom to make a choice. It's no different now. Battle passes exist, $100 in-game cosmetics exist, premium currencies exist, but you don't need to participate in any of that if you don't want to. New marketing and monetization ideas that we have never heard of are going to emerge. But if you recognize the personal responsibility that you, the customer, have in this transaction, and you become okay with saying no, then you won't be spending money on things you regret. The customer ultimately has the money, so that means they have the power. We tell companies what we will allow them to do based on how we spend our money. This applies to everything in life, and particularly to games. If you don't like the way a game is monetized, or you feel as though you like it but not at that price, you need to be okay with not buying it or with waiting for a sale to purchase it at a discount. Somehow, gamers have come to the conclusion that review bombing any game with a policy they don't agree with is the only way to handle things. Can that be effective? Sure, sometimes. But when more people are spending money on that game and those microtransactions, it can be easy for a company to ignore those negative reviews. Ultimately, money talks the loudest. Support great games with the amount of money you feel is appropriate, and if you don't like a type of monetization, don't buy into the hype.
So, what price would you pay for a new entry into your favorite video game series? Do you prefer to pay it all up front, taking the risk that you may not like the game you purchased? Or do you like the free-to-play model, where you can try the game out to see if you like it and pay for only the items you want? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.